All right, thank you. So we're going to go back into the discussion between the panel and presenters for a few more questions from the panel, and then we will, after that, move on to the public comment on the science review. So if you do intend to make a public comment on the science review related to the BDCP effects analysis, please fill out a blue slip and hand it to me. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to the panel to ask a couple more questions.
So I obviously have another question because I asked ICF to put up a slide for me. So just a comment, and that is the importance of getting the multidimensional models and the 1D models to do the same thing is important. This is one place. This is Georgiana Slough, and this top figure. And as I understand it, the periods where you see the arrows are the periods when the delta cross channel is closed, and the periods that where there isn't an arrow, is when the delta cross channel is open. And what's significant about this area is this is where the delta cross channel comes in, and then right below it is where Georgiana Slough is, and it is a very difficult junction to model. And I'll just say that it is a very difficult junction to model. But it's really important for how the circulation goes in this area. What this tells me is that we're either not representing the open water habitats in the same way, or there is a specification of this flow split that maybe needs to be changed when the delta cross channel is changed to a different configuration. One of the nice things about multidimensional models is that you actually have the real bathymetry, and so you have gradients of velocity across that channel, where when you're in the 1D models, you're coming into a junction, and then you're having to model that flow split. So I'm just going to say it's a real challenge, and I wish that the models would always meet up exactly, but they don't. But so though we're saying that it's these flooded habitats that are causing this change, it may also be how we're representing those flooded habitats in our models that is changing. So it's really important to figure out the calibration. And do you have any comments on how you've gone about trying to get those two to match? And I know it's a hard thing because it's a very complicated system.
Right. No, that's a very valid point. And so there are a couple of things. Especially, so for different parts of the delta, the focus is on a different timing also. So for instance, here the critical thing we were trying to get is the December through June period when which is the primary fish migrating season, and obviously there is a mismatch between the two models between when the gates open about how much flow is entering the Georgiana Slough, and that mismatch. So this is one of the reasons why we actually, instead of trying to match the two-dimensional model, the absolute values predicted by the two-dimensional model, we tried to match the incremental changes as much as possible, so that if there are any differences in how the control structures are handled between the two models, we leave that out of in the comparison. So it just happens to be, in fact, if you look in the DSM-2 calibration, generally DSM-2 does a good job, and even though it's a 1D model and it doesn't understand the momentum effects at the bends, it does a good job at representing the tidal conditions at the junction. Reasonable job, I would say. So anyway, for the reason we call this reasonable corroboration between the 1D and 2D models is primarily because we got good agreement in the season that we thought is important. Yes.
Thank you. That helps because it is important to know when you were thinking where are you focusing on your calibration? You know, if June is your most important part,
Right.
then that's important. But there should be a recognition that maybe this model is not performing quite as well in this second
Sure. Yes.
second condition in the system. So, thank you.
Yeah.
No. Is this on? Yeah. So I had a question about water temperature with changes in restoration of tidal wetlands and open water habitat, because I saw some discussion of water residence time and increasing in water residence time as a result of increasing open water habitat. But with respect to water temperature change, it seemed like those changes were mostly ascribed just to climate change. So I'm wondering to what extent analysis indicated changes in flow and residence time leading to increases in water temperature.
Yeah, we do have an appendix, an attachment to Appendix 5C that looks at changes in water temperature. With the caveat that those changes are assessed at the DSM2 nodes, which are for the existing channels, not for restored areas, but they would capture, I think they would capture the changes in residence time, but even with those changes in residence time, there really isn't much of an effect on temperature in the existing channels.
In the existing channels?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, because I was sort of surprised to see that conclusion when I was doing my read. So I was trying to see some place that kind of helps me understand how that conclusion was made.
Yeah, it's a attachment. Well, the specific analysis looking at those existing channels is an attachment 5C, maybe, to Appendix 5C.
Okay.
It's an attachment to an appendix to the chapter.
So that's on existing channels, but does not include newly created open water habitat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those weren't modeled with the DSM-2.
Okay.
Follow up on that. In the DSM-2 model, you have CSTRs representing the open water habitats. Do you actually calculate temperature within the CSTRs? I can't remember how that part works with the temperature model of DSM-2.
So we have not performed that modeling. Actually, different consultant did that, but they are part of the DSM-2 model, and the way the DSM-2 model simulates the temperature. I mean, we apply the same meteorological condition. I don't think it actually captures the mixing effects that you would see on a sub-daily basis because of the tidal inflows very well, especially because the way the open water areas are represented are basically a simple cylinders, if you will, and it does flood, elevate and drop, but it's not really, the amount of area is not expanding necessarily with different tidal elevation. So the amount of cooling and warming which actually changes over the tidal signal, that's not being represented in the DSM-2 model. So it's a fully mixed condition right now. And
I would add in Chapter 5.3, so that's the ecosystem and landscape effects of Chapter 5. There is a summary of what that temperature analysis is, and also a lot of the literature review around it, because there is emerging data around what this looks like as far as, in different seasons and between night and day, and what the temperature exchange looks like. So we did try to capture that, not quantitatively, but in Chapter 5.3, so ecosystems and landscapes, is a summary of what we think those effects are in the delta.
Anything else? Anything about detrital stuff? Are we good there? Okay. So, Lindsay, I think we're fine for today.
All right.